Have you ever thought about what it's really like inside a truly genius mind? We picture it as this amazing superpower, just a constant stream of brilliant ideas. But for a lot of people, the reality is, well, it's a lot darker because that incredible intelligence can actually feel like a trap.
And that right there, that's the unsettling idea at the very heart of what we're exploring today. It's the notion that exceptional intelligence isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's more like a cognitive cage, one that can trap you in a state of constant mental overdrive, anxiety, and just this profound inner conflict.
And look, this isn't just a feeling or some abstract concept. There's real data that points to this. A pretty big study of over 3,700 Mensa members, people with IQs all above 130, uncovered something startling. They reported way higher rates of mood and anxiety disorders compared to the general population. So, what in the world is going on here?
Well, this brings us to what we're calling the genius trap. It's this painful, often totally hidden reality of having a mind that just doesn't stop. It's constantly analyzing, constantly questioning, and processing everything with an intensity that can get completely overwhelming.
So to really understand this trap, our investigation has to start with a first major clue, and it's hidden deep inside the brain's actual wiring. It's an idea that might just explain that relentless mental noise that so many brilliant people say they experience.
Okay, so to get this, we have to talk about something called synaptic pruning. As we grow up, our brain does this amazing housekeeping. It literally cuts away weaker or redundant neural connections to make the ones that are left faster and way more efficient. Think of it like turning a tangled mess of little backroads into a clean, fast superhighway system.
But here's the kicker. What if that cleanup process worked a little differently in some brains? There's a really compelling theory that suggests in gifted brains, this pruning is just less aggressive. So instead of a tidy, streamlined network, you get a hyper-connected one with a ton of extra pathways that stay active.
And what you end up with are two totally different operating systems. The efficiently pruned brain is like a clean desktop. It's focused, it's decisive. But the hyper-connected brain, well, it's like having way too many tabs open at once. Now, seeing every angle and every potential flaw can be a huge strength, but it's also the exact thing that leads to that chronic overthinking, that feeling of being completely paralyzed by analysis.
But this state of constant internal overdrive, it doesn't just stay in the mind. And this is our second clue. It's about how this mental intensity actually spills over and affects the entire body in a very real and often very painful way.
This is what's known as the hyperbrain, hyperbody theory. Basically, it suggests that a superactive brain creates a super-reactive central nervous system. This means that the body's response to the world is also cranked up to 11, for better and definitely for worse.
Here's a perfect example of how it plays out. It can start with something tiny, right? Like a scratchy tag on a shirt. An average brain might just ignore it. But the hyperbrain processes it with so much intensity that it can actually trigger a low-level stress response in the hyperbody. Then the brain notices that physical tension and analyzes it, which just reinforces the initial alert signal, and all of a sudden a tiny irritation has snowballed into a state of chronic stress. It's a vicious loop.
And this hyperbody response, it's not just theoretical. That same Mensa study we talked about found a direct correlation. The high IQ group reported significantly higher rates of conditions tied to immune system issues, things like allergies, asthma, and even autoimmune diseases. It's a pretty striking link between the mind and the body.
So, I know. So far, this all sounds incredibly bleak. A brain that won't shut up, a body that's on constant high alert. You'd think it was a design flaw, right? But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if this intense inner conflict isn't a bug, but a feature?
And that brings us to the big twist in our story. It's a powerful theory that completely reframes all of this suffering, not as some problem to be fixed, but as a necessary catalyst for deep, profound personal growth.
It's called the theory of positive disintegration, and it was developed by a psychologist named Kazimir Dabrowski. He argued that for people with these intense inner lives, all that psychological tension, the anxiety, the conflict, it's actually the engine of their development. It's the process of breaking down an old version of yourself so you can build a new, stronger, and much more authentic one.
This quote just captures the idea so perfectly. That feeling of falling apart isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you've outgrown your old way of being. The very structure of who you thought you were just doesn't fit the person you're becoming anymore.
So how does this actually work? Well, It's all fueled by friction. It's that gap between the world as it is and the world as your deeply held ideals tell you it ought to be. Now, that tension is incredibly uncomfortable, but Dabrowski argued it's what forces you to question everything, to evolve, and ultimately to define your own values.
And that leads us to the final part of this journey, the conscious, deliberate act of rebuilding yourself. Not based on what society expects, but on the values you forge for yourself in the fire of all that inner conflict.
You know, people often compare this whole process to climbing a mountain. It is hard, it's demanding, and yeah, there are times you feel completely and totally lost. But the disintegration, that falling apart, that's what gives you the raw materials to build a new self, one that's stronger, more authentic, and actually capable of reaching that summit. So, what does this actually look like day to day? Well, it starts by trying to see those inner conflicts not as a problem, but as a chance to grow. It means finding people who get it, who understand this way of looking at things. It's about learning to use your intensity as a strength, but also knowing when to rest. And maybe most important of all, it's about being gentle with yourself. This kind of deep development is a marathon, not a sprint.
We started with this idea of a genius brain being a trap, but maybe the real story is so much more profound than that. Perhaps the very things that feel like a curse, the overthinking, the intensity, the constant inner conflict, maybe they aren't a cage at all, but a crucible. A crucible designed to forge a stronger, truer, more authentic version of you.